Well, on this day last year, it was all about the talk of 40 degrees recorded in the UK for the very first time in recorded history. Very different story across the UK and Ireland as of today, of course. Thanks for clicking on to the Wednesday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. Greatly appreciate the amount of views that yesterday's video got, albeit very controversial for some people. A lot of people did appear to agree with some of the comments that I made mention of yesterday with regards to perspective on the heat wave that we're seeing across southern portions of Europe at this moment in time. No getting away from it. We have got a warmer world than we have seen in recent decades, and indeed the heat waves may arguably be stronger than they have been in the past as well. But when you compare actual national records, continental records, it doesn't look as if we're seeing anything that's beyond the realms of what can be considered, not normal's probably not the right word, but that ceiling of extreme is not being breached. And like I made mention of yesterday, I would be more concerned if we were seeing 50 Celsius in the UK, 50 Celsius in Europe, or beyond that. And you never know, maybe in the coming years, we may see that taking place here. But I personally strongly believe that over the millions of years that this planet has been around, we do have, evidence and indeed fact proof that the planet has seen, of course, multiple spells of warmth and cold as well. I do think that there was one source that made the claim that the planet is warmer now than it has been in the last 12,000 years. How the heck do you know what records were achieved within a 12,000 year period? So I think it's all very important to, no matter whether you believe in carbon dioxide being the cause of this warming, a possible contributing factor to the warming, which is possible, or there is other aspects to consider. There's something I haven't, and it's not deliberate. I have actually forgotten to make mention of the fact that urban heat island is a very very big contributing factor, especially nighttime temperatures being retained, all that heat bottled up in major cities. We've got Jakarta in Indonesia, you've got even Moscow in Russia. London is a big urban heat island. Tokyo, the world's biggest city, Delhi. We've got these much, much larger areas of concrete in which temperature becomes trapped, and then it struggles to be released during particularly the overnight period. So that is a contributing factor. That is a man-made contributing factor to the warming of the landmass. And in terms of course ocean warming, well, there's a lot of debate with regards to that. Carbon dioxide, of course, the oceans are the biggest store of carbon dioxide, rather than the air, but it had to come from somewhere. It came from the sky into the oceans, of course. I'm not an expert, but I'm basically spitting out as I'm thinking of stuff with regards to the whole story. Very, very, very complex discussion, and I can understand to an extent both sides of the story. I think you probably have an idea in what way I'm leaning, but I do believe that there is a legitimate aspect to the other side of the story as well with regards to this warming trend here. But yes, this day last year, multiple places stretching from Greater London to southern Lincolnshire, we've seen temperatures exceed the 40 Celsius mark in the first time of our lifetime anyway, and the first time in whatever amount of years. Very, very different story altogether today. These are the current temperatures over Europe here. So it looks as if it would appear to me that the temperatures have not surpassed the Spanish record of 47.4 set back in 2015. Looks as if we've not seen a temperature on, Sardinia, Sicily, mainland Italy, even Greece as well. Looks as if it's remained below that threshold of 48.8 Celsius, which is, of course, the European record. And we are seeing temperatures into the upper 30s, low 40s in Turkey. We almost see that on each and every summer that passes by. Now, interesting enough, speaking about urban heat island, the temperature at Sky Harbour airport, which of course is a mega concrete jungle. We've got, of course, a concrete jungle planked in the middle of a desert, and we have now achieved the all-time warmest night on record for the for Sky Harbour, Phoenix Sky Harbour International Airport here. No great surprise here, given the fact that we have got a heat wave in place. It looks as if there was a heat wave back in the 1970s that was stronger than this one that we're seeing at the moment. Again, that's debatable, but certainly, when you've got that vast amount of concrete, and of course you've got heat wave conditions, there's no real surprise that eventually we're going to see the warmest night on record, and that is exactly what's been achieved in in Phoenix over the last 24 hours or so here. This is an interesting tweet that I put out just literally just before shooting this video. This is June versus July of of this summer so far, of course. So we're heading towards the final month of meteorological summer. Of course, this was June, the warmest on record for the UK, according to the Met Office. And this is, of course, July thus far. So this is through the first 19 days of the month. And you can see here, average to below average across the UK and Ireland as well. I'll be honest with you, that actually has surprised me somewhat, given how warm the sea surface temperatures are surrounding the UK, adding moisture to the atmosphere. Particularly nighttime temperatures are kept up. We've had daytime temperatures fairly subdued, even though we did have that one heat spike that allowed the temperature to approach 29 Celsius in Scotland. We had 32.2 Celsius achieved in the south of England. That was the second time this year that we've had 32.2. And, I've made the call that the highest temperature of the entire summer, I made the call of 33 Celsius. And certainly, if it remained the way it is now, that would be a pretty darn good call, if you ask me. But we've got the month of August to go, and we have to remain with the open mind that anything could happen with regards to heat. I do think that we've got enough moisture in the soil now that it may temper any real extreme surges of heat, but there is always a possibility as we go towards the month of August that we will see surges of heat coming up from the south here. But that core of hottest conditions is shifting eastwards over southern Europe, over the Mediterranean basin, and we'll see how high the temperatures go in the next few days here. But this is the CFSV2, by the way. The 500 millibar height anomaly is here for the month of August. And you notice here that we've got a negative now, rather than it just being a kind of neutral height field, neither above or below average. We're now seeing the CFSV2 with a negative over the North Sea here. And rainfall wise, that signals a fairly wet August. Now, if you go back to my summer forecast, I had warm and dry June, cool and wet July, but I thought that the average to above average month overall would be attributed to the warm sea surface temperatures. By the way, see if the water temperatures were of 2015 levels, this would be a pretty cool July, that's for sure. I guarantee you that, by the way. We would have had a cooler July if it wasn't for the fact that we've got water temperatures so warm surrounding our shores. But that is a wet looking August for not just the UK and Ireland, by the way, but for the majority of Europe overall. So that is very interesting indeed, isn't it? And then let's have a look at the 2 meter temperature anomalies. Yeah, average, possibly even slightly below average across parts of England and Wales for the month of August here. So that is a very interesting looking chart indeed. By the way, I made mention yesterday, and wrongly, it was correctly pointed out by somebody, that I'd made mention of the fact that they'd been talking about the increase in drier summers across the UK. I was correctly pointed out that, the narrative is of more extreme events of dry and wet here in the UK. But of course, we have seen that steady increase in terms of rainfall really since 1980. And you could really correlate the kind of broken black line here represents that kind of average between the extremes of weather versus drier. and you can almost see the NAO, the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation. Sorry, I'll get there in the end. You can almost see the cool versus warm phase of the AMO, and you can see here that really from about the late 1930s, in fact, in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, when the North Atlantic was cooler than average, you notice here that there was a bit of a downward trend in rainfall during the course of the year in the British Isles. But you notice here, really, at the turn of the 1990s, when the Atlantic started to really warm up, that's when we started to see an increase in rainfall. And I thought that's very interesting indeed. So it kind of throws away that kind of aspect of some of these dry summers and the claim of drought and concern of climate and the changes that we're seeing taking place. It's interesting how the overall long term trend is for an increase in rainfall, throughout the course of the 12-month calendar year across the British Isles with the warming of the North Atlantic here. So I just wanted to kind of slightly correct that statement that I made yesterday overall. So, are we going to see any big change coming up in the next wee while here? Certainly, that strong negative that we've got over the UK, over northern portions of Europe, trapping that hot, dry, stable air mass that's delivering heat wave across southern Europe, the western United States, and eastern portions of Asia as well. We've got this type of, it was actually discussed on the deep dive yesterday by Aidan McGivern. And a very, very impressive piece, as always, by the Met Office, I must say. I will give them credit where I think it's due. But they were discussing how these heat domes, so to speak, are trapped, roughly in the same latitude with a wave 5 pattern at this moment in time. Do we see any kind of change taking place in this very stuck, very blocked type of pattern at the moment? Well, really, for the majority of this year so far, we've had quite a blocky type pattern. And of course, there is a contributing factor to the warm Atlantic. The big reason why I thought the summer would flip on its head from a dry June to a wet July, possibly a wet August, was the developing El Nino. We've seen that back in 2012, where I thought it was going to be warm and dry, a barbecue summer, and we had a washout. And it looks as if there must be some sort of correlation between the developing El Nino in the Eastern Pacific, as well as the Manchulian Oscillation, depending on what phase it's in, where you've got that widespread subsidence versus upward motion, thunderstorm activity. That then shapes the upper air pattern across the northern hemisphere. And there is evidence to suggest that the Manchulian Oscillation is progressing eastwards from Indian to Pacific Ocean. And the question is, do we get a kick, a ripple effect in the upper atmosphere further downstream? So, of course, over the North Pacific, North Atlantic, do we see that kind of shift in the position of the ridges and the troughs? It looks as if we go out of the month of July on a fairly unsettled note here. If we play through the loop, this is off the GFS, of course, the overview chart of weathercharts.com, and you can see the continuation of this cool, showery, northwesterly flow, nothing to write home about in terms of heat. Then we've got more areas of low pressure that are coming in. Of course, we've had that blocking over the North Atlantic up into Greenland, that negative NAO signal, keeping Greenland a little bit warmer than average versus the colder than average June. We're seeing these systems drop down from a northwesterly direction and then organising thanks to the bundling of air near or over the UK and Ireland here. We've seen it last weekend with that 984 millibar low that produced all sorts of wind, heavy rainfall, strong thunderstorm activity. Looks as if we've got another weekend of fairly messy conditions, deepening area of low pressure on the southern flank. We could have some fairly strong winds across Ireland, England and Wales in particular. The centre of that low staying a little bit further north. But another spell of wet and windy conditions. This is, of course, for the upcoming Saturday and Sunday time frame. That system then moves east into the near continent. Of course, we've got plenty of heat still across the Mediterranean basin, but certainly there's no heat to speak about across the British Isles. And then it looks as if we end the month of July with more areas of low pressure moving in. So we'll just have to remain patient. Run out of time. Like, share, and subscribe. See you again tomorrow with more. Bye for now.